Hi everybody, my name is Josie Barton and I did a summer internship in London back in the summer of 2018, and I'm just here today to help you guys prep for your interviews, give you some tips and tricks, tell you what to expect. So first I'm going to talk about some background information you need to gather about your position and about your company, and then we're going to go into 3 different types of interview questions that I think that you might see. So first, when it comes to background, you need to be doing some research before you even get into an interview with anyone. First, you need to learn about your company. So where are they based? How do they make their money? What are their revenue streams? What is their main goal? What are their core values? So every company on their website will have a list of 4 or 5 core values that they like to say that they use every day in the office, that they like to exemplify in everything they do, and you want to have those memorized. So for each one of those core values, you should find an anecdote, an example of how you specifically exemplify that value. So if they ask you a question like, why do you think you're a great fit for this company? You can say, well, I think that, I really have this skill and it's shown by this and this. And that being one of their core values will definitely point out to them and help you stand out against the rest of the candidates. Then you're also going to want to do some research into the actual industry in which the company functions. So for me, I did 2 internships in the beauty industry. So what I would need to do is I would need to know, okay, what are the general trends in the industry? So right now retail is down, online sales are up. People are more interested in anti-aging than they are in heavy cosmetics. Those are all things that I need to know. I also needed to know about who their main competitors were. So Revlon was this size, but L'Oreal was much bigger. And how were we competing with them? So being sure that you have a really great understanding of your company and its values, and also its place in the marketplace and the threats and the trends that are happening around it is all really important. So after you've done background on your company, you sort of need to do a little bit of background and reflection on yourself. Because the first question that I've been asked in every single one of my interviews was, tell me a little bit about yourself. And so you need to have a bullet pointed list taking from, where you're originally from up until all of your most recent work experience. So this needs to be so practiced and so rehearsed and so memorized that it seems completely natural. So for me, I would start saying, well, I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but now I'm a senior Altman Scholar at Tulane University. And this is what the Altman program is. These are my degrees. This is my past work experience. And then this is who I am as a person. Always throw in some personal kind of adjectives, descriptors. So I would say, I have a natural affinity for technology. I can always be counted on to meet deadlines, things like that. So you want to make sure it's not too long, you don't want to bore them, but you want to be sure that you hit all the highlights of what you've been doing. So then when it comes to the 3 types of questions, that first one falls into just sort of the basic category. So this is going to be, tell me about yourself. Why do you think you're right for this job? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And what is really important here is building bridges. So when they say, why do you think you're right for this job? What you need to do is you need to have examples already ready. So you'll go into that job description before your interview and you'll say, okay, they're saying that they're looking for an adaptable worker who's used this type of programming language and has done this and this. And for each one of those bullet points, you're going to find a bridge between that and your experience. So you'll find an example of you being adaptable. You'll find an example of a time when you used that programming language, or when you didn't, but you learned something really fast, and show that you're eager to learn. Things like that. So if they ask you why this company, you have all of those core values ready, as well as bridges between the actual job spec and your past experience. This is the point at which they might also ask you about your strengths and weaknesses. And I've been asked about my weaknesses far more than my strengths, and my answer always has something to do with, I used to get really overwhelmed when I would be given a big project. But now I know how to break it down into smaller deadlines, keep myself accountable, so at the end of that really long period, I've already reviewed my work multiple times before ever showing it to my boss. I'm able to break it down and tackle the problem piece by piece. So you want to show that you might get overwhelmed by something, you might not be great at something, but then show how you're working on that. Show how it's really not a weakness, even though you're saying that it is. Something else I've been asked a lot is, what is your greatest work accomplishment? So have that in mind, something that you're most proud of. So then the second type of interview question you should be prepared for would be the behavioral questions. So the behavioral questions are things like, tell me about a time when you XYZ. So this could be when you led a team, when you failed at something, when you changed a process. There are a lot of different kind of ways this could go. What this means is that you're going to have to really reflect on your past experience, whether that be in school projects, in previous internships, in jobs you might have worked over the summers. You need to reflect on that and see what you can pull from. So what I would do is I would go through each one of my past work experience and I would say, okay, the summer of 2018 I worked at Revlon. This is an example of working in a team, resolving a conflict, changing a process, and I'd come up with the kind of big buckets that I thought I could use from that work experience. And then I'd kind of go the other way and I'd say, okay, I have these buckets. So one's going to be leadership, one's going to be teamwork, one's going to be conflict, one's going to be my values and my motivation. So I have these buckets and then I'm going to say, okay, under here, this story from Revlon, this story from Visa, this story from Ernst & Young. So my past work experience, I'm able to put into these buckets. So if they ask me anything, whether it be a time that you resolved a conflict, that you didn't get along with one of your teammates, that you had to adapt or put someone else in front of yourself, I can go into that conflict bucket that I have and pull from all those examples that I already have. The final type of question I think you should be ready for is the case-based questions. And really don't worry about this, I'd say, because they're generally going to tell you if you have these types of questions coming and you'll be able to practice beforehand. But just so you have an idea of what they are, I'm going to talk about them a little bit. So there are two types of case-based questions. The first is a market sizing question, and that's when, those are those preposterous questions like, how many ping pong balls fit in a 747 airplane? And don't freak out because you're not supposed to know the answer to this. For me, I was asked how many Apple Pay transactions occurred in the US in 2017. And so they don't expect you to be able to estimate this properly because that's impossible. They really just want to see that you're not going to freak out, that you're going to tackle this question in a logical way. So I would say, okay, there are 320 million people in the United States. There are 100 million households. I'm going to say that I'm going to break down the households by income. You would have a piece of paper to do this. And you generally just sort of estimate by saying this many people have a phone, this many people have an iPhone, this many people want to use it, and end up with a number like 50 million people have it. I'm going to say they did 100 transactions each. You get where I'm going. But again, they would generally tell you if you had that type of question. The other type of case-based question would be about a company. So they'd say, company X and Y is losing profit. Their profit is decreasing. It's been decreasing for 3 years. What can they do? Well, you'd say, okay, well, they can increase revenue or decrease costs. And based on the industry, you'd give some examples of how they could do each one of those things. Again, don't freak out. They would definitely tell you if you had those types of questions. In general, I would say you really need to have the background on yourself. You need to have that bulleted list, and then be ready for your basic and behavioral questions. That's the most important thing. And of course, always have questions for them at the end of the interview. If you ever say, I don't think I have any questions, that's not good. That in itself is a testing of you to see if you have questions, if they're intellectual, if they're curious, if they show that you've done your actual background research. So, I hope this helped. Don't freak out. Don't worry about your interviews, your visa. I know it's all very stressful. It's going to be great. Just practice, do your research, and it'll all be fine.